benvenuto Roberto.
Grazie.
Qui non è molto difficile di presentarti, tu sei uno molto conosciuto, però facciamo una piccola introduzione. So, Roberto Saviano, whom we are welcoming this afternoon, needs no introduction. But we are going to do a bit of an introduction, like we do with every guest that comes to Sciences Po. So he is Italian, not only Italian, he's from Naples, which for a Spaniard like me has a very special connection. So he's Napoletano, come on dit, as we say in Italian. He's a writer, he's a screenplayer, he's a journalist, but he is best known for having started to put a bit of light into the biggest part of our economy, which is the criminal economy. The one that is hidden, the one that pays no taxes, the one that has to respect no laws, but the one that keeps on growing. There is a saying in English, Roberto, that says that there is no better disinfectant than light. And it's precisely this light that you put into this criminal part of our economy that we want you to unpack for us today. I will not go into Gommora, 000, Piranhas, and all these amazing works that you have done. They are well known to our students, but I think what they want to know is they want to hear from you. How can we handle? These are students, they come from all walks of affairs, from public affairs to international affairs, from the economy to development, from climate change to governance, very important word. What we want to do with you today is for you to first share with them what you see, what worries you.
Pronto.
And then we will obviously open the floor to the students for them to put the difficult questions to you. So without further ado, Roberto, a te.
Grazie mille Arancia, grazie. Io parlerò in italiano, quindi... Ma siete tutti italiani?
Ci sono alcuni italiani qui.
L'avete beccato. Mi aiuteranno loro per chi non comprende. Metto l'orario perché devo parlare 20 minuti, poi prima di
più o meno,
più o
sì.
meno, metto 30. Chi si iscrive in questa scuola vuole comprendere le dinamiche del mondo, vuole comprendere le dinamiche politiche, vuole comprendere i limiti del potere, le qualità del potere, le tossicità del potere. Quindi, lo dirò con magari un po' troppa sicurezza, ma non potete non conoscere le dinamiche mafiose. Se vi manca la conoscenza, per voi che vi occuperete di economia, di diplomazia, di politica, di filosofia politica, sappiate che è fondamentale, perché le organizzazioni criminali sono l'emblema del potere, della tossicità del potere, del condizionamento delle democrazie, del condizionamento tossico dell'economia, e vi serviranno per capire nel profondo il vostro tempo, perché guardare alla storia criminale significa guardare a una dinamica economica senza mediazioni, cioè tutto ciò che nella società legale ha delle leggi e delle mediazioni, nella società criminale invece è diretto, quindi più visibile. Per intenderci, nella società legale vieni licenziato o vieni sconfitto dalla concorrenza, nella società illegale vieni ammazzato o eliminato dalla concorrenza. Questo per dire che ciò che affronteremo non è qualcosa di particolarmente lontano o diciamo secante ai vostri studi, è il cuore dei vostri studi. Un dato su tutti, visto che chiaramente vi confrontate con i numeri e con i dati, è importante partire da questi. Il narcotraffico è l'unica economia comparabile a quella del petrolio. Non esistono economie misurabili con quella del petrolio, mentre l'economia che riguarda quindi il perimetro del narcotraffico intendo tutto ciò che ha a che fare con il narcotraffico, è l'unica comparabile. Addirittura leggerete spessissimo nei titoli che viene detto che l'economia criminale, quindi attenzione, non solo il narcotraffico, ma anche tutto il resto che ha a che fare con l'economia criminale, supera il petrolio. Se pensate che i membri dell'OPEC segnalano un profitto di 561 miliardi, quindi billion, di euro. L'ONU segnala come fatturato del mondo criminale 870 miliardi. Okay? Ma qui dentro c'è tutto. Non c'è soltanto il narcotraffico e non c'è soltanto l'attività mafiosa, c'è anche il furto, le truffe, il gioco, insomma tutto. Quindi di cosa stiamo parlando? Stiamo parlando che chi si occupa di crimine si occupa di economia. Chi si occupa di crimine si occupa di politica. Chi si occupa di crimine si occupa di storia contemporanea. La droga, secondo sempre i dati dell'ONU, lo sportello che si occupa di droghe dell'ONU, viene attestata, poi questi numeri variano continuamente, intorno ai 262 miliardi di dollari. Allora, cosa succede? Che spesso mi viene in mente una domanda del tutto personale. Ma se il narcotraffico fattura così tanto, ma quanta gente si droga? Cioè, quanta massa di gente pippa, fuma? Cioè, è incredibile, no? È una massa inimmaginabile che non è data misurare dai numeri che riguardano, per esempio, i centri di assistenza alla dipendenza. Non coincidono. Le persone che chiedono aiuto o il sistema sanitario che investe in dipendenze è di gran lunga minore rispetto alla massa di denaro che le mafie guadagnano. Com'è possibile? È possibile perché i due vettori importanti di guadagno delle mafie, coca e fumo, marijuana, hashish, spesso non portano i consumatori a dover chiedere un aiuto di assistenza, a differenza dell'eroina o del fentanyl, che sono invece droghe che portano inevitabilmente la persona alla disperazione e quindi all'accesso dell'aiuto statale o dell'aiuto di diciamo, organizzazioni che provano a curare quella persona. Questo significa che noi i dati di consumo reale delle droghe non li abbiamo, mai, abbiamo solo indicativi. C'è un dato interessante che produce la Siegel, uno studioso olandese, che durante il Covid il consumo è aumentato ovunque nel mondo. Solitudine, disagio, disperazione ti portano ad accedere a sostanze che devono mitigare il tuo dolore. Le organizzazioni criminali verso il narcotraffico hanno un rapporto complesso. Per esempio, le organizzazioni italiane, l'organizzazione principe che gestisce il narcotraffico è l''ndrangheta, mafia calabrese, poi c'è la camorra napoletana, campana, e poi c'è Cosa Nostra, siciliana, poi in realtà c'è la mafia foggiana, pugliese. Bene, queste organizzazioni hanno dovuto costruire un'antropologia, letteralmente un'antropologia, persino una morale per codificare il rapporto tra l'organizzazione e la sostanza. Per prima cosa, l'organizzazione considera la droga nemica della propria condotta morale. Per intenderci, le organizzazioni mafiose italiane non consumano droga. Questo almeno dichiarano. Un uomo, un affiliato che consuma droga, ce ne sono, ma non è considerato un vero capo. Assolutamente. Questo cosa ci dice? Ci dice che le organizzazioni criminali non hanno una vocazione al narcotraffico, semplicemente è utilizzato il narcotraffico. Come utilizzano i rifiuti, come utilizzano il ciclo dei rifiuti spesso egemonizzato,
waste management,
come utilizzano le pompe funebri,
or
come utilizzano la distribuzione
funeral,
petroli, molte pompe di benzina
organizations,
sono
or
emanazione diretta delle
petrol
organizzazioni,
stations.
come
Many petrol
utilizzano la
stations
grande
belong to the
distribuzione dei
organization, the same way that they
supermercati.
use supermarkets and
Sto facendo
retail.
l'elenco di tutti gli ambiti dove sono
So they
potenti.
use undertakers as well for funeral organization.
Il mondo intero conosce
The
questi
whole
numeri,
world
ma voi non
knows
sentirete
the
quasi
figures,
mai, per
but you
fortuna
will
ci sono
never
delle
hear them.
eccezioni, ma non sentirete
Well,
mai
there
il
are a few
dibattito
exceptions, but
politico
you will never hear
internazionale
a
occuparsi di
real
queste cose.
political
Il Fondo
debate,
Monetario
an international
Internazionale,
political
no,
debate on this
racconta
issue.
di 118
The International Monetary Fund
118 miliardi di euro
states that
come denaro
118
sporco
billion euros
identificato.
of
A
dirty
fronte,
money has
oltre
been
a questi
identified,
118 ci sono
and
90
we also have
miliardi di
another
guadagno
90
dagli
billion
investimenti puliti
euros
delle organizzazioni.
which are
Quindi il
earned
Fondo
with
Monetario
political
ci parla di
investments. The
208
FMI says we
miliardi,
have 208
miliardi all'anno
billion
movimentati
euros
dal crimine.
which are moved
Mi
around
sembra
every
un
year
numero
by
gigante
these
che
crime
deve
organizations.
permettere,
Sounds like
costringere
a
il
lot of
dibattito
money,
pubblico
and
a
it should
intervenire. Sentirete
actually
molto poco. Sentirete molto
make
poco
the
perché
political
in
debate
fondo
look into this,
questo
but it
flusso
doesn't
di denaro
happen
diventa,
because the
tranne nel suo
flow
iniziale
of money,
segmento,
except for the very
che è
initial
sporco, poi
part,
diventa
which is
pulito.
dirty money, the rest becomes
E
clean.
qui sono, diciamo, cerco di
it's
fare un
laundered.
passaggio
And
culturale.
this will
e di
be
questo
a
tipo.
cultural transition for me.
Se io vi dovessi dire i grandi narcotrafficanti e mafiosi italiani,
Say I tell
dei
you
nomi,
the
vi
main
direi
mafiosi
certamente
or
Messina
narcotics
Denaro, che
traffickers.
certamente è un
I would
potente,
talk
ma
about
non ha
Denaro,
nulla della potenza imprenditoriale, per esempio,
who
di un uomo che si
is
chiama
very
Pasquale
powerful,
Condello.
but not as powerful as
Pasquale
Pasquale
Condello,
Condello.
capo
Pasquale
della
Condello is
detto il
boss of the
Supremo,
'Ndrangheta. He's called the
e,
Supremo, the
il
supreme
quale,
chief.
interessantissimo,
And
aveva la maggior,
this is
la
interesting.
maggior parte dei suoi
He
soldi investiti
Has
personali, non
invested
delle
most of his
organizzazioni,
personal
investiti in Canada.
wealth in Canada.
Ma se lui dovesse pentirsi,
However,
cosa che non
if he
farà
were to
mai,
turn his
essendo,
coat, and he never will,
diciamo, uno dei grandi vertici
he
dell'organizzazione,
is at the very
quindi quando
top
arrivi a
of
quei
the mafia
vertici,
organization,
mi
and
ricordo
if
che
you reach the
l''ndrangheta
top of the
ha
organization,
gerarchie
you don't
molto
turn your coat.
strutturate,
I mean, the 'Ndrangheta has a very
quindi devi
structured
fare tutto questo
organization and
soprologo
hierarchy.
per arrivare
It
ai
means that you have to
vertici,
climb
dopo
all the stages and all the steps to get to the top of the organization.
una gerarchia nell''ndrangheta
And in the
si chiama
'Ndrangheta,
dote.
Dote is the
E
hierarchy, the very
Pasquale
top
Condello
of the
ha la
hierarchy, and Pasquale Condello is at the very top of the hierarchy, so he has the Dote Suprema. And if he were to turn coat, and if a judge were to ask him, where exactly is your money invested, he would not be able to answer the question. He would not know. And that's why dirty money is so strong, because they don't know where the money is. He takes the money to an office, to a fund, an investment fund, to an accountant, and then the accountant will guarantee the money, the investment, on with his own life. And he will bring back to the boss the dividends, but not the information as to where the money is invested. And the investment fund that takes the money from Condello in Aruba, in Luxembourg, in London, because those are the offshore capitals in the world. I'll talk about that later. The money will land in those places, will be invested in funds, investment funds that receive money from companies, from accountants, from anybody. They take the cash. They don't even want to know where it comes from. They don't care. And the money will be invested, and there will be a yield, and the dividends will be paid to the mafia boss, who does not care where his money was invested. What he cares about are the dividends. The financial investment fund does not know who the money belongs to, and then the money is invested in hotels or steel factories, and no one can establish the connection between the hotel and the origin of the money, the crime organization that the money came from. The boss will know maybe that a restaurant, a hotel belongs to him because they are very close to him, and he will know a few things, and the state also will know that and might even be able to impound those investments. But otherwise, he does not know where his money goes. And the accountant who deals with the investment will guarantee the money with his own life. They are uomini d'onore. There is a matter of honor here. And these men guarantee the money with their own lives. You know, none of you will defend your business with your own life. They do. And they claim that they defend the money and the investment with their own life. In the 'ndrangheta, at the lowest level, it's very difficult to translate, so I'm going to say this in Italian. It's called contrasto onorato. When you enter the organization at the lowest level, you're not an affiliate, you're simply a soldier at the lowest level, and you are considered as a contrasto. Contrasto means that you're opposed to rules and laws because you're going to make huge sacrifices for honor. And contrasto is the lowest level. And contrasto onorato is one step above. You're not still an affiliate, but you already have a good relationship with the organization. Now, you have to understand the difference here. It's capitalism, except that you put your own life at stake. You know, if you're an accountant or a chartered auditor and you make a mistake, you may lose money, maybe you will end up in prison. If your competitor is smarter than you, then you will be beaten. In the mafia organization, if you lose, if you make a mistake, you die. Your life is at stake. And so it's merciless. If you don't make money, you die. There's one thing I'd like to tell you about. Maybe you have heard one of my presentations elsewhere, and forgive me if I repeat myself because I say this all the time, but it's very important that you understand this. Why do crime organizations behave so mercilessly? Why? I mean, it's obvious, we take it for granted, but why are they so merciless? Why do they kill people in such a violent way? Why are they so oriented towards fight rather than discussion or negotiation? Well, there is an economic explanation. Profit, making money from narcotics trafficking. In Italy, we have the anti-mafia investigative department, and it's been confirmed by the American DEA. If I were to invest 1,000 euros to buy shares from a company, an IT company, a big IT company, after 1 year, if everything goes well, and if the company makes profit, I will get back 1,200 or 1,300 euros. If I invest 1,000 euros in cocaine trafficking, after 1 year, I will have earned 182,000 euros. So if you invest 5,000 euros in cocaine, you'll get 1 million. And this is what the people who come close to the mafia have in mind. If I invest 5,000 euros, I'm rich. 5,000 euros to buy pure cocaine. When I sell them, I will earn 1 million. and I can sell cocaine anywhere. It's not like diamonds, because to sell diamonds you have to be an expert. No, cocaine can be sold anywhere, to anyone. Hence the violence. Because if I give you time to open your own narcotics trafficking business, then you will buy yourself an army of people, of mobsters, and then we will start fighting. And if you step on my territory, I'll kill you. France does not feel like there are so many criminals in the country. And yet, the dynamic is exactly the same, like Italy, like Brazil, like Spain, like everywhere. Obviously, the political vision is different, but all the mafia organizations, regardless where, will one way or another land in France. It's important that you understand this. It's also important that we're not talking just about the suburbs or developing countries. Assassinations. I mean, we have the sociologic demonstration of this. Colombia. Colombia was a central country for narcotics trafficking because they produce cocaine, and they produce the cocaine sold subsequently in the US being one of the biggest markets. Now, in 1978, Colombia was not yet at the time at the very heart of the chessboard. There were 100 assassinations for 100,000 people. In 90, when narcotics trafficking had acquired a much bigger role, there were 70 assassinations for 100,000 inhabitants. As narcotics trafficking increased, then the number of assassinations also increased. Mark my words, in the US, where Cosa Nostra does not deal in drugs at the time of prohibitionism and immediately after, say until the 1940s, maybe immediately after the Second World War, early 1950s, at the time Cosa Nostra killed people. There were mass shootings, but the decisions were taken at the time with a longer period of time. Cosa Nostra would kill a competitor after a few months when they found that that competitor was acquiring too much power. But now things go so fast, and they have to kill people immediately. And violence is simply due to the fact that narcotics trafficking is very powerful. All the organizations, the Brazilian mafia, the South African mafia, they are all scared that someone else will become a competitor because they became very rich almost overnight. And if they become so rich overnight, you cannot control them anymore. So they're very wary of competition. There is also another interesting research made by two Colombian researchers. Very interesting. These researchers brought to the light two things we didn't know. If we take all the cocaine produced in Colombia, the three main producing nations are Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. Cocaine I'm talking about. The main countries producing heroin are Afghanistan, Thailand, Laos, and Burma. Only 3% remains in those countries, 1% possibly. The rest will simply be sold abroad. 10% goes to US, 34% goes to other Central America countries, and 50% is divided between Asia and Europe. Now, interestingly, 90% of the money made by narcotics traffickers will land in Europe and in the US. Nothing left in the producing countries, and that's also very important. You need to understand this. the money made by narcotics traffickers do not make the producing country wealthier. The money goes elsewhere. And that's a question that I have asked myself many times. I was brought up in the Gommora area. I was born in 79. So when I was a child, I watched the mass shootings unravel in my own country. And I thought, if they've got so much money, why won't they fix our basketball field or our football field, or why do they not improve our local school? But it's not the way it works. The money doesn't stay there. The money never stays there. If it becomes visible, then it will be impounded by the police or the government. So it will move either to northern Italy and maybe possibly abroad.
And the second part of the answer is that you always need to keep your area hungry. Otherwise, no one else is going to find the money you're prepared to pay acceptable. If you create wealth in your territory, there won't be people willing to be depending on you. No, they will want to be self-sufficient and autonomous. In New York, the Cosa Nostra was a kind of mob you might have heard about. Mayor Lansky in the third episode of The Godfather is played by Roth, who is the actor. But in any case, they decided to invest in their own areas, and in this way they made a difference, because the youth in their areas, as a result of this investment, of this interest shown to them, stopped being involved in criminal activity in general. They decided to move to university or do something else. So on the contrary, other organizations don't do this. Development within one's territory is going to be hindrance to your business, and this is really going to help us understand also how many companies follow this philosophy. When Colton companies actually produce this business, they don't invest anything in that area, those poor areas. No, they want to keep the area poor. They want to give out charity, and they don't want to produce anything that could create wealth, rights, or development for a local population. And I also wanted to show you a couple of videos during my masterclass to really explain a topic that is very cultural, if you may, and which can be considered the other side of the economical part. And this theme helped me, at least, to understand the mafia way of doing things. Now, the men who belong to this firm follow the rules, whereas all the others follow laws. And who follows the law is a weak person. Those who follow rules, however, are those who, according to their conception of life, has understood everything. And if you understand this, you will understand 50% of the mafia logic. What are the rules and what are the laws in this case? I can explain this quite easily. Everyone knows how you win a tender. Of course, you need to introduce your company, you need to introduce your experience and make your bid. This is the law. This is what the law says. But then, really, you need to think of how things work in reality, the percentage you need to hand out, etc., etc. So everyone knows the laws that one needs to abide by in order to become chair at university. But then you all know the rules also that you need to follow in order to get to that job. So the law is for stupid people, whereas the rule is made for those who understand the world. So crime organizations refuse laws. They consider it to be hypocritical, and they prefer rules instead, because rules are very often simple precepts based on intimidation most of the time, because they know that basically everyone is scared and everyone wants to survive. So this is how they explain things to themselves. They are really there to defend this universe in which they live, which is a reign of terror. Everyone else outside is afraid of this reign of terror, and this just shows their capacity of being able to survive in this world. So, for example, how to judge someone. Now, in the mafia world, in the mob, the way you go about judging someone is very easy. You need to just simply assess the person according to their behavior towards you. I've witnessed several killings which were actually made because someone simply said something bad about the other person. Why? Because the comment, the opinion someone has of someone is fundamental in a mafia organization. And I will now say to all of you, if you watch interviews of mafia bosses who were interviewed, or if you look at the people interviewed during these inquiries, always say, well, no, these people are okay. There's nothing wrong about them. Why? You might say it's a rule. Well, this is the way people go about saying things in the world of social networks. It's exactly the same. If you are going to find some advantage being related to someone else, you're going to go along. So the search for truth is not paramount in this case. On the contrary, if we consider truth only what resembles us, we're very, very far removed from truth. And mafia in general, all these mafia firms have defined a code for it, and this is fundamental to understand. So much so that, but I'd like to really remain concise, so much so that when two men of honor, two men who were officially affiliated to mafia organizations, a combinati, so to speak. Combinato means that you followed the ritual to become affiliated to the mafia organization, and there's a journey you have to go through in order to get to the top. Anyway, two men of honor cannot introduce themselves. This is a rule. Let's just imagine them in this room. If they were to speak to each other, well, I mean, they wouldn't be able to introduce themselves saying, yes, I am a man of honor and I come from this family, etc. In order to be introduced as a man of honor, one needs to rely on a third party who's going to be a warranty, so to speak. And this is the way the mafia firms behave in order to avoid making mistakes or revealing themselves and then, of course, losing their honor. Now, these things may seem ridiculous to you, but just imagine this is so common that during feuds, we heard of meetings during which clans, allied clans, meet up in order to see each other, to say we must not shoot each other, because very often you can see a face, you can recognize that face as not belonging to your clan, but you didn't know exactly whether they belong to an enemy clan or not. And so in order to avoid any doubt, you would shoot that person. So this is the reason why these clans would meet up on a regular basis, just to meet each other and see each other's face. The mafia laws are there to define this set of rules. Common sense, profit, callousness, this is all part and parcel of it. In the liberal world of the criminal world, mafia is very good at imposing rules. So much so that Mexican and Colombian firms are called cartels. Why? Because they decide the price, not the market. And when they think their cocaine is too expensive, they will not be defeated by markets. They will be killed by rivals who will offer cheaper coke. And therefore, they will have more weapons to kill the rivals, the cartels. Now, in France, all the cocaine that is being taken in France, the heroin, etc., during these past few years, was defined by a certain code. Heroin came from Afghanistan, hashish comes from Afghanistan. So whoever buys this product is going to fund Talibans. It's interesting. The Taliban wars were funded by the European and American markets of hashish users. And then there's cocaine. Cocaine, managed by Corsicans, arrives via Africa in Mali. There is quite a lot of drug trafficking. All the drug arrives into from South America into that area, goes up through Mali, and lands in Rotterdam, generally speaking, or Vado Ligure in Italy, or in other harbors in Spain. So, and every step of the way, the price increases. 5 euros, 3 euros more. This is the reason why it arrives in France at a very high price, because, you know, that's the way it is. So I was saying, when it gets to France, it's going to be used according to who rules the territory. The little ball of cocaine is going to represent money for the small drug dealers. If the drug dealers were to turn his coat, he would only create problems for two other people who are higher up in the rank. Now, he refers to a hierarchy, which in turns refers to a higher rank. So, in France, it is Corsican mafia that manages all the drug trafficking in France, but will also share its profit with North African organizations. This is the reason why, you know, the French say, well, of course, this is the Corsicans, but really all the money ends up in France and will be invested in real estate, in legal sectors, because this money will be used to build buildings, to build public infrastructure, etc. So In summary, and I'd like to conclude this masterclass by sharing a thought with you. It's worth perhaps mentioning the Panama Papers and London. I will be very brief. A few years ago, you may recall that all the information of who was legally hiding the money was communicated to Panama. So Panama was, or an office, a specific office, a law firm in Panama, decided to spread word of who kept their money there. This was a huge scandal, although nothing illegal is involved there. But nevertheless, it was very interesting for all researchers, because in Panama you could find all the names of the big Mexican drug lords, but you could also find very respectable people besides their names, you know, the Queen of England, etc. Why? Because the money was actually brought to a hub that made money for all of the affiliated people. Why did these names come out? Well, because this was a revenge. Why did Panama decide to take revenge? Because London was becoming the capital of money laundering. If you were to ask me now what is the most criminal country in the world, I would say without a doubt London. London is not a criminal city like Honduras or Juarez. As you know, in Honduras, there is a series of mass killings. The fact is that London has control over the major Russian, Nigerian cartels. They're all there. Everyone that matters in this world is there. London is the place where you could bring your wealth and is not controlled. Those who might know the criminal justice system in the UK might say, you are saying nonsense, because if I go to London and take a lot of cash, no one is going to open a bank account for me. Yes, but if I ensure that that train goes through Malta, Malta is not going to ask for anything, and if it's done through Gibraltar or Barbados, I will get no questions asked either. Neither Jersey will ask any questions. So basically, you can avoid having to answer any questions or justifying your money. So Brexit, remember, is there to hamper citizens and not companies. Because of a Commonwealth, you know that in 3 minutes you can open up a company in Malta that has access to European investments. So it's fascinating to see that the mob organizes the same cycles, the same routes that are used by legal entities. Why? Because crime has to get there before everyone else. When criminal organization decided to really find something interested in COVID, I got really scared, because I realized that when they have an interest in something, they have an interest because they want to make money out of it. So you need to worry about this. And in conclusion, the offshore system is paramount to understand the impact that non-traceable funds has. And the offshore system is fundamental in order to understand how any fiscal policy can be evaded by the main groups that will make deals with Google or other companies, or who will set up a company in Luxembourg, such as Amazon, for example. And criminal organizations basically follow the same path. Of course, the laundering part is a different topic that I might address through your questions. But anyway, if you want an advice, follow what I say. If you see Coke, you'll only see a handful of dust. If you want to see Coke related to the world, then you will understand what business lies underneath. And now I'm here available for your questions.
Grazie.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberto.
The floor to you. Microphones on the right and on the left. All you have to do is put your questions. There is a guarantee of an answer, so don't miss the opportunity. We'll start with you.
Il mio italiano non è perfetto.
Unfortunately, my Italian is not fluent. I learned Italian quite a few years ago, but I would still like to try and ask my questions in Italy. There is a country you didn't mention in Latin America, which is Ecuador. And in Ecuador, the situation in the town where I was born is dreadful because a lot of people decided to leave my hometown. And so your perception of the situation is, needs to be perhaps explained. What can we do as citizens? I can tell that you suffer because of this. In Ecuador, there are quite a lot of important cartels. It lives a dramatic situation. Why? Because quite recently there was a growth of these cartels. There's always been this kind of business in Ecuador, as far as I know, but today's crime scene is much bigger there, and this is due to two factors. The Peruvian cartels are getting stronger, and Ecuador has become the armed partners, and so this meant that cocaine could be shifted quite easily from Venezuela to your country. In that country, in Venezuela, there is a populist government of socialist, communist ideas, and there is a group in government, in government itself, that decided to set up a cartel with its own symbol, which is the sun. And so this explains why Ecuador is really in such dire straits. And because you're here, because you are studying here or maybe researching here in Paris, I'd like to say that my first advice is, let's talk about this. As much as it may seem useless to do it, I think it's fundamental to talk about the situation. Baldwin, an author I love, my favorite American author, says that if it's true that everything that we take care of do not change, it's true that all the things that change have changed because someone took care of them. So if it's true that talking of Ecuador, of what is happening there, can seem in vain, it's also true that if there is going to be change there, it's going to be because we decided to shed light on it. And the situation and I'd like to conclude because I can't give you an answer. Situation in South America is dramatic because the consumption of cocaine is increasing, and so this means that there is a lot of interest in being in this line of business, and drug lords. Well, the best drug lords, the most important drug lords are Mexicans, and you might say strange because Mexico doesn't produce any drugs. Well, precisely. Why are Mexicans so powerful? Because they are a little bit like the Amazon of the drug trafficking. They're distributors. They're much stronger than producers, and this also works in the drug world. Those who distribute drugs will determine the price, will determine the speed at which the product is going to land in a certain country. And in the past, it determined as well who produced the actual product, whereas now it doesn't work this way. Just as for products, if you are not distributed, you are dead. Well, in the same things, in the same way, things work in the narco world. Ecuador distributes, Honduras distributes drugs, Guatemala distributes drugs. The Italian organizations that have been buying for a century cocaine from South America and heroin from Turkey, Lebanon, or Southeast Asia. Well, they are aware that the Taliban have a regime that is supported entirely by heroin. You might find this outrageous, but it's true. Opium gives them the money that helps them to sell heroin, because it will also produce all the drugs that are being used during a surgical operation, and so opium-based drugs are bought from India, and in turn India buys the stuff from the Taliban. Everything is being documented in published articles by the American Congress. Very often the data that I use and that I use today go back to a few years ago, because as in terms of scientific inquiry, this is how it works. But it's important to also understand that the scientific numbers cannot be fast in this world. We need to look at different data and inquiries, and the most official sources take a little bit more time to get to the answer. Sorry, I wasn't able to give you an answer.
And then you put the question.
Ciao, Fabiola.
Please introduce yourself. Fabiola, I'm a student. I'm both Italian and French. I'm very moved. My question is about the relationship between mafia and the institutions, because it goes well beyond corruption. So I'd like to understand how we can identify these relationships and how we can appoint in the institutions people who are outside of the system, and finally how we can fight the system. Well, that's a difficult question. I don't know where to start actually with my reply, because the relationship between organized crime and the world of politics has been in existence for centuries. In the 1930s, it was had a certain aspect, and in the 50s it became different, and in the 90s it became different again, and now we have a completely different kind of relationship. I'll try to keep this short. South American organizations or the Italian organizations, because this didn't happen in France initially or Germany, Spain a little bit, but in the periphery, outside of the main towns. So in those systems, they actually chose someone to appoint in the institution. So they had an inside man inside the institutions and possibly his relatives or friends all around him. And so he became the person they voted for. And the exchange was, I'll vote for you and you give me the contracts, for instance. But this has changed over time. Why? First, because politicians became exposed. Sooner or later, people found out about this relationship. And public contracts also are now monitored and studied with more attention. And so this dynamic still exists, but in the provinces, in the small towns, not in the large towns and the capitals anymore. So what do the organizations do now? Well, I mean, it's more or less what was happening in Colombia. Pablo Escobar made a huge mistake when he became a candidate himself, because for all the powers in Colombia, real estate, construction, etc., they had to get rid of him because otherwise they could not go on. So they had to live without him. But nowadays, things have changed. Now you want to have people inside the bureaucracy rather than in the institution. So somebody who's going to be your man inside the home ministry. And, you know, the ministers, when they become appointed, have to understand and study what they are going to be dealing with. And some people are there to help them. And those are the key characters, the key stakeholders. And, you know, initially they give information to the ministers what to do here and what to do there. In Italy, we have many examples. We have had people sentenced, for instance, the founder of Forza Italia, and even the Undersecretary for the Economy is actually standing trial right now. Antonio Dali was sentenced for collusion with the mafia, and he was one of Denaro's men. So, but that's a thing of the past, really, because it took 30 years to actually get him sentenced. But that's a thing of the past. Now the dynamics have become even more dangerous because they actually can act directly on the companies, and the support, the political support, will depend on the advantages granted here or there. And I mean, that's my own analysis, obviously, my own assessment based on a number of based on my study. If you vote for somebody who's not very smart, it's easier to condition. So we vote for someone who's not smart or not very good, because then he can be influenced and manipulated. On the international level, what is happening is even worse. Russian organizations are a very good example. If you talk to experts, I remember talking to Kasparov, the chess player, the famous chess player, and he said to me, but the boss of the Russian mafia is Putin. And if you study mafia, like I've been doing for the last few years, it's very difficult to hear this. And if you study conventional criminal organizations, you cannot come to terms with the idea of having the head of the government being the head of the mafia. But he said that because he was referring to the very special Russian criminal history. And I tried to write on this. There's only one article because every time I start to write on this, you know, I was blamed. And the war between Russia and Ukraine, well, what roles do the mafias play? Because I read documents regarding Ukraine and Russian cartels, the Ukrainian cartels were in favor of Moscow. there is an organization called the Circle of Brothers, and they always had a very strong relationship with the Ukrainian mafia. Mogilevich, so-called the brain, the big boss of the crime organization, is of Ukrainian origin, but his mother is Russian. So Ukrainian cartels, are they on the side of the Russians or against the Russians, from what I have heard, but I never speak about that, because I'm still researching this. Apparently, they are now opposing the Russians. For the very first time, the Ukrainian cartels have decided to disconnect themselves from the Russians. But I have no evidence. This is only my own interpretation. In every country, you have people who actually orient crime by going for what they are interested in. Mexicans, some of the Mexicans at one stage told Obrador, one of the presidents, had a curious attitude towards narcotics trafficking. It was not very strongly opposing. And he actually said hello to Guzman from El Chapo, one of the main bosses of the criminal organization. Why did he say that? Why did he say hello to him? Because the cartels have actually helped villagers during the COVID pandemic. So there was a time when if you went against the cartels, you were actually hurting the welfare situation, the help they had given to villagers. Ibuprofen, face masks were provided by the cartels. Initially, when the cartels went to the villages to give ibuprofen and masks, they were wearing balaclavas. But then people did not know who had given what to whom, and they thought this particular cartel had given bread, where it was a different cartel. So they started wearing a T-shirt that said Cartel Beltran Levina to give food to the villagers, so that they would be acknowledged for doing so. Why am I saying it's very difficult? Borsellino and Falcone, the Italian judges, used to say, rightly, don't expect the judgment from the court for mafiosi. If they are sentenced because they are mafiosi, and if they're not, it's because they're not mafiosi. It doesn't work that way. There are simply some people who can never be sentenced because they don't have a direct relationship with crime. They don't make money directly, but they still have a kind of behavior that helps the mafia, that supports the mafia, either by doing things or not doing things. So don't expect things to be black and white. And that's one lesson I learned. And I can give you so many different examples, but examples of votes given to people who were not mafiosi, but who were not very smart and could be easily manipulated. I'll give you one more example. During the waste crisis in Naples, I was 20 at the time. Naples was simply flooded in waste because nobody was picking up the waste anymore. And people started to organize demonstrations, and they wanted some of the mafia became environmentalists because they wanted their land to be used to as landfills, and now they are pretending to be environmentalists because they want to work with windmills. They say that they make the political decisions to increase the black market. We don't need to legalize pot, for instance, because then there would be no more black market. And when people are not sentenced, doesn't mean that they are not mafiosi. And that's as simple as that. Thank you very much. And we'll go to the other side. Hello. Maxime, I'm from Morocco, and I'm a student in human rights, second year. How far are we from legalizing cocaine? Because this obviously would have an impact on the mafia. Well, I was discussing this with Arantxa. Legalizing cocaine is a very difficult issue because it would have a huge impact on people's health, and people's lives. Let me explain. You cannot take for granted that cocaine consumption will remain within the same limits as wine consumption. I mean, you can be an alcoholic, but you can also have a drink now and again. Some people drink a couple of cigarettes and never become chain smokers. But cocaine will make you into an addict, and it will hurt you. So my answer is, yes, maybe sometime in a future society where people will be aware of the damage, and therefore more awareness brings more control. And maybe in that case, we might legalize cocaine as well as other drugs, marijuana and pot. You come from Morocco, so you probably know that Moroccan has been devastated by hashish trafficking. The Moroccan mafia actually controls the market in Belgium and Holland for pot, for hashish. I mean, that's my own assumption. It's a hugely powerful organization, the Moroccan mafia, based only on pot, and they are at war with the Afghans, not just on the military market. And the Moroccan state is under a lot of pressure from the traffickers. So sometimes they are allies, sometimes they are enemies. If, as Kasparov was saying, Putin is the head of the mafia, why are mafiosi bosses arrested? Because people ask the question. And I will tell you this. Because they commit crime. Either they go too far, or they are very violent, or they've been exposed by a journalist, and they have to go to prison. Also, because not all the organizations have the same relationship with the power, with the government. In Italy, some of you may remember Giulio Andreotti, who was the boss of the Democrazia Cristiana party in Italy. And he stood trial, and he was sentenced for having had a relationship with the mafia in the 80s. According to this ruling, he was supported by a part of the mafia. So he was an enemy of the Corleone clan, and the Corleone were the enemies of the Palermo mafia that he was allied with. So when somebody gets arrested, the government will say, oh, we just arrested traffickers, so we are clean. Yes, but what about the enemies of the guy you just arrested? Are they your friends, or are they also your enemies? So legalizing cocaine will be the first step, real step, in the fight against the mafia. We have the evidence in Colorado, Uruguay. Not so much in Holland. Not so much in Holland, because in Holland it was not legalized; it was liberalized, which means that we actually look away, but it's not really legalized. So although in Holland liberalization means that there was less crime around hashish and prostitution. Oh, prostitution, by the way, the mafia stay away from prostitution. They take the money, but they don't manage the market. But in a nutshell, if you ask me to answer a few seconds, will drugs legalization destroy the mafia? I will say yes, but you need to legalize all the drugs, and it's impossible to manage. In Italy, unfortunately, banning drugs is still the answer. People say, yeah, but if we were to legalize drugs, there would still be a black market. Well, we don't have a black market in none of the markets where drugs have been legalized. And black market is easier to fight against. I mean, we've seen this with cigarettes and tobacco. There was a lot of black market and contraband for cigarettes in the 80s. But when we decided to fight against that particular market, we just defeated it. So black market or contraband is easier to stop. But, legalizing light drugs, maybe to begin, And then maybe at a later stage in a future society, legalizing all the drugs might be the answer. But yes, it would be the answer to defeat the mafia. This is scientific data. We know exactly that we would defeat the mafia, but that's in a different society in the future. Thank you, Enzo. Io sono Enzo. La legalizzazione del cannabis potrebbe danneggiare la mafia, è una buona e una pessima cosa. E cosa impatto avrebbe sulle istituzioni e sull'economia?
Provo a darti una risposta sulla Francia.
I'll try to answer in reference with France. You're French, right? Yes. All right. In this case,
c'è un'antica regola.
there is a very old
Le banlieue
rule
spacciano tutta l'erba, la droga, la coca
by which
dei corsi, ma i corsi non possono metterci piede mai.
Corsicans can
È un
never
antico accordo.
put
Per cui cosa succede?
well, they can
Che
never
non legalizzando
control
in
what
Francia,
happens in
stai dando
France
un potere
in the realm
immenso a
of
tutte quelle
drugs. And so
organizzazioni
in doing
mafiose,
so, all mafia
nordafricane,
organizations, especially
ma non
North
soltanto,
African
che
organizations,
vivono della distribuzione della droga.
become much more powerful because
Se domani si legalizzasse
they
in
distribute
Francia,
drugs. If
sparirebbero tutte le
legalizations were to
organizzazioni
take
che
place in
vivono
France,
della
all the
vendita
organizations that live out
marijuana,
of hashish, marijuana,
e quelle che vendono
will
metanfetamina,
disappear, and those that
ecstasy,
sell amphetamines,
questo si
ecstasy,
finanzia
very often
con i soldi del hashish.
are
Metteresti in
are
crisi
funding
anche
their activity
chi porta
thanks
avanti
to the
il
money
mercato droga
stemming from hashish. So you would also have an impact on those that
Perché non si fa? Il tema è soprattutto politico.
distribute harder
Si
drugs.
teme
Why
che
is this not
legalizzando
done?
la
Because
parte
it's
politica che porta
political.
avanti queste
By not
famiglie sia
legalizing,
percepita
it
dall'elettorato
is felt that
come una parte che invita le persone a
citizens
drogarsi.
might feel
La
that
mia
by
linea è
legalizing
sempre
this, you
quella,
would invite people to
cioè
take
se
drugs.
non ti piace drogarti
If
devi
you
essere per
don't
la legalizzazione,
like
perché
to
legalizzare
take drugs, you need
impedisce
to
al denaro sporco di condizionare la tua vita.
not legalize this, because in doing this you are stopping dirty money from entering your life, and to some extent
In
this
Francia soprattutto esiste,
justification
purtroppo è pericolosamente
which happens
slittato
to take
sul
place in
tema
France
migrante.
also unfortunately
Questo è pericolosissimo
touches upon
perché,
the migrants
la propaganda
topics.
inizia a dire, ma i
And
migranti
why?
portano
Because
crimine.
people are starting to say, well, the
È il traffico che genera crimine.
migrants are beginning to bring about crime, but that's not the case. As you know, it is the mafia organization that force desperate people to become drug dealers. So we need to look at the cause and not at the effect. In Italy, people say, well, Tunisians are drug dealers, Moroccans are drug dealers, etc. And I often say, well, let's just suppose that they're all North Africans, but who gives them the drug? Italians, of course, and it's the same here in France. Ask yourself who manages the whole business. It is the Marseillan drug traffickers, the Corsican drug traffickers, and where does the money go? The money that is made by the Tunisian in Marseille. The money ends up in the legal system. And this is why it's very easy to use this information for propaganda, because it seems logical. If you are in favor of legalization, it might seem that you are in favor of drugs. It's exactly the opposite. This is the reason why I might say in Paris, in the suburbs, or the areas where drugs are thriving, I think these areas would definitely disintegrate in some way as a result of legalization. But unfortunately, during the electoral campaigns, this isn't felt to be a priority, and so it's not done. Hello, my name is Giovanni. I'm one of the students here. I'd like to ask a question on legalization. Public prosecutor Gratteri, for those who might not know him, is one of the main prosecutors against mafia. And you also said that he was against the legalization of light drugs. He underscored the fact that all drugs are bad, and in doing so, you wouldn't hit the most important drug trafficking organizations. Why, in your view, is such an important person against legalization? Well, yes, he has a reactionary position. Well, he feels that it is a moral stance. It's bad, just as alcohol and tobacco. It is an ideological stance, certainly, but based on a moral value. In his view, the state cannot sell marijuana, and he would also ban tobacco and alcohol. He said it several times as well. But what matters here is that he's lying on when he says that this wouldn't have an impact. It's not true, because it would have an impact on 30 to 40% of the criminal business. He says that even if you legalize pot and hashish, there is still cocaine, heroin, fentanyl in the Mexican cartel. So it's true that by legalizing, mafia organizations wouldn't die. But we have already the example of alcohol. When prohibitionism was running very well in the United States, extortions, embezzlements, prostitution was strife as well. But prohibitionism allowed for richness to increase in this business. Capone was very powerful in Chicago. He grew up in New York, but also Lucky Luciano and other big bosses became powerful when alcohol was prohibited, and they supported throughout the entire period, associations that were against the alcohol. When prohibitionism came to an end, they had to find other ways to make a living, and this is why they decided to smuggle cigarettes as well. In Naples, there is a very nice area called Santa Lucia, which is close to the seashore, and that area there was a lot of cigarette smuggling, so much so that it was called the Fiat of Naples, because it gave a lot of income to hundreds of families there. When the smuggling ended there, most families there decided to move onto cocaine, and so it's even worse. So when I hear when legalizing light drugs, you're not going to destroy criminal organizations, I say you're quite right, but it's going to have an impact, and it's going to make criminal organizations weaker. It's a matter of fact. In New York, when I was where I stayed for quite a long while, I would say that only if you are a drug trafficker, you're considered to be really at risk. If you are a simple drug pusher, everything is being tolerated. And the American data on which I base my research, Colorado data, are fascinating, because they show that there was initially a crisis for teenagers. You know, teenagers ask their friends who are older to buy pot because they can't buy it themselves. But now there is a different situation, because this product is become normalized as a result of legalization. So I'm really convinced that legalization can bring about an improvement. It can weaken the mafia organizations. It's true, there is a lot of ideology, but I do acknowledge the fact that this topic is highly controversial and complex. I think we'll give room to 2 or 3 more questions. Please. Hello. My name is Simone. I study diplomacy here. I come from the Marche region. Quite honestly, I didn't think it would ever be possible to ask a question in Italian in this room, so I would really like to thank you for this opportunity. During your description earlier, I compared your words with those of others I heard during other conferences that were organized by my school. And despite all the people I heard in the past, I cannot but realize that the criminal topic was always looked at through the lens of, something trivial that is quite distant, or by analyzing the big mass killings or other things like that. So do you think that maybe school programs should be reviewed in order to perhaps transform its contents in the light of criminal organizations' behavior nowadays? Yes, I think it's true. This would be worthwhile in schools and universities. And in Italy, I think there is quite a big effort in making people more aware of this situation. And this is one of the reasons why I'm very pleased to be here today in this university, is because I am truly obsessed and not just convinced by the idea that it is fundamental for anyone who's interested in journalism to understand what is being said by institutions, by big institutions that have a big impact on all our lives. So basically, we tend to see mafia organizations in 2 ways. Either we are fascinated by these firms, or we create a distance between us and them because of what we know we've learned at university. And in university, I think it's important to talk about the actual topic from an anthropological, economical, sociological standpoint. So I would tend to say that it's important to expect from universities this kind of teaching, because this is a topic that fascinates all of us. What fascinates us is what scares us as well. It is negative empathy. I like the negative character, the bad character, because by studying this character, I can take control over it. This is what is very often said. And so, yeah, I think that most students would really want for these topics to be dealt with. Just as it is important to know contemporary history and law, etc., it's important to know something about this world. Another question. My name is Luca. I'm Italian. I studied development here. And here at Sciences Po, we deal with pure policies. Most of us write policy briefs, and statistically, it's clear that sooner or later one of us will write a policy brief that will be sent to some governor or interior minister, and because we're talking about mafia and criminal organizations, normally recommendations would be required. If you were to write these recommendations, just to make it simpler, all right, I would like to ask you, what would you write? And what about the second question? Hi, my name is Andrea. I'm from Turin. I study governance and diplomacy here. And I'd like to revert to the question of international cooperation against international criminal organizations for a series of reasons. Before certain topics became well known, there was a huge pressure felt by civil society. Do you believe that civil society could be a driving factor that might bring organized crime on the international scene, or do you think that because of the concussion and the corruption, there might be an intervention by the political world that might stop this? Another question. My name is Annalisa. I study environmental policy, and I'd like to ask questions on the so-called eco-mafias. I would like to ask if you might want to include something on the infrastructures and services that are actually missing on the territories. Might you also add the possibility of adding that the public prosecution is quite slow in Italy and complex? Which of these two factors, in your view, is more impactful? Last question. Hi, I'm Elena. I study political economy, and my question has to do with something totally different. Why did you decide to write fiction as a journalist? I mean, why did you actually decide to focus on this kind of writing, which of course made you famous? What advice would you give to any young person who might want to become an investigative reporter? These are really, really tough questions. What would I write as recommendations in the end? If I've correctly understood your question, you're asking me what kind of signal I might want to send to my readers. Well, my recommendation would be put from the very start. I would say, read this only after having read this. And I would give the reader enough time to understand a series of figures that might be fundamental. For example, it's already happened in the past. I was contacted by European presidents, and not just European. Often, when you talk to these people about such topics, and they are interested in such topics, they immediately think, okay, this is a problem that has to do with the police forces, etc. Well, you need to look at these topics, you need to tackle these topics, taking into account different aspects: legalization, infrastructure, investments, work, and so I would say, look at this document only if you are certain to want to tackle the causes and not just manage the effects of these happenings. And one of the weirdest things that I want to share with you is that criminal organizations are the ones that most invest in youth compared to other legal systems such as ordinary companies and politics. It's one of the organizations that give power to young people, even at a very young age. And this is due to the fact that there is the possibility to be recognized within that firm. And it is not an economical recognition. I would like to also add that in the south of Italy, when you are an affiliate, you begin by earning 500 euros. Then this increases, as you know, mafias have a salary and a 13th month as well that is paid, and also a bonus that is being paid when you have a disabled relative, and they also pay you when you're sick. It's just like a company. It's run like a company. When you kill someone, you get a bonus as well, 5,000, 8,000 euros. This obviously has a huge impact on people's lives. So if you were to ask me something about killings, I would not answer how many arrests you need to do in order to get to a certain result. But now, on civil society, I would say that civil society is our last hope. Why? It's civil society that generates politics that has an impact on our life. But from a semantics standpoint, it's not easy. Let me explain. Very often, I don't know whether you've ever heard Cuffaro, who was the president of the Sicily region. He was sentenced because he had relations with the mafia clan, with the Provenzano clan. He had inundated Sicily with posters saying mafia is a load of shit. Now, there were a lot of other people who were considered by even turncoats as anti-mafia, against the mafia organization. So it's interesting to see that some things that cannot be defended by public opinion have to be hidden. However, these actions are considered to be necessary in order to protect a power and in order to guarantee some profits. Now, I interviewed a Neapolitan boss, Giuseppe Misso. He is one of the big bosses I interviewed. Well, he was reticent about telling me of the different killings that took place. None of the bosses I interviewed wanted to really talk to me about this. They were turncoats, otherwise they wouldn't have spoken to me. Why? Because you cannot justify a homicide. You cannot justify a murder. They are only keen to talk about the money that was invested, the stuff that was bought, because this is part and parcel of the entrepreneurial world that they embraced. But they don't want to talk about the nasty part of it. And there's much more to this. Civil society needs to really show what is happening. They need to know all this, because when someone is really attacking a journalist who's talking about the different feuds, well, this can happen because the mafia organization says you're lying. You are here to show that everyone can be killed by our organization. But it's not true. We only kill those who are ready to die, our rivals. They always say, I defend in order to defend myself. I kill someone for my legitimate defense. Whereas you are going to write that these murders are taking place on a trivial basis. So it's not true. In order to become a hero, the mafia problem is going to be presented as something that concerns everyone, but it's not true. You are outside, we are inside. This is our problem. So occasionally a problem is killed by mistake. Someone is killed by mistake. Sometimes they kill, very rarely, a judge. And so Cosa Nostra, the Corleonese clan that killed the judges, the magistrates involved, are hated by other clans. But all the criminal organizations will say these are not things you can talk about in universities. If you're an affiliate, you know that you run the risk of dying or doing time in prison. So this is the reason why they will say this is none of your business, it's our business. They will say, do you think that legal entrepreneurs want to do the same things that we do, make money, win tenders and such things? Well, they will also add, we come from a very complex area. We have a difficult past, and we use rules that others perhaps are not keen to use, but they consider to be exactly of the same species as entrepreneurs and businessmen. Now, as far as the judicial aspect is concerned, I would say that as far as Italy is concerned, the worst part of it all is our judiciary. Totally unreliable, extremely slow, corrupt, but anyway, it's impossible to conduct an inquiry till the very end in Italy, so it's almost impossible to have faith in the judicial system in Italy. There are some very rare persons who are excelling in this domain, but it's only a handful of people who cannot stop the system that is totally slow and inadequate. And mafias know it. This is the point. And I come to my conclusion by submitting what follows. Just imagine a small child that hurts the most valuable vase, and he gets hit by his mother at the age of 22 instead of at the age of 6 when the fact happened. I mean, this is how the Italian judiciary works. You get punished much, much later. And so for mafia organizations, the judiciary in Italy is perhaps the best system in the world, because obviously they don't know how to combat criminal organizations. We, therefore, in Italy have the best anti-mafia laws of the entire world because we paid a price for it. But the bureaucracy is extremely slow. I unfortunately live under escort. I've been living under escort for years, from the age of 23, and I was so Bidognetti was accused by the public prosecutor said he was actually threatened by me, Bidognetti and another boss, in order to get to the first sentence. It took 13 years. And so, in a way, the boss didn't mind waiting all this time. I mean, within the business he ran, he got the admiration of all his affiliates. Very often, people in the criminal organization react in such a way in order to respond to rivals. There was Don Pepe, for example, a priest that was killed. Why was he killed? Because the criminal organization needed to show that they couldn't have been attacked in any way by a priest. They needed to show rivals that they were strong, and they had to do the same thing with me. They couldn't bear the idea that I could be telling people stories and truths about mafia organizations. This weakens them. It weakens them and their reputation in the eyes of rivals, because then the rivals would think, well, if this has happened once, it could happen to us as well. This is the problem in the judiciary in Italy. The politician who was sentenced recently as a man of denaro, and a month after his arrest, Messia Denaro was arrested. Well, I might say that the whole procedure went on for 20 years. It took 20 years to arrest this boss. And so the underworld knows full well that it will take a very, very long time before running a risk of being sentenced. And so defamation is another aspect of this. Recently, I was accused of defamation. Those who defamate you know that you're going to be under pressure for 10 years, that you're going to be paying lawyers as well for a very long while. And so bureaucracy is willingly kept in that manner as an impossible system, because basically it is there to be manipulated. So it is a system that is drowning in thousands of laws in order to protect certain people. If I say to you, for example, shops shouldn't have one specific certificate on hygiene, they should have 3 certificates. Well, if I wanted to close down that shop, I would be able to do it. And so that system helps those who don't want things to evolve, to go to the end of their very objective.
La mia scelta è una scelta narrativa.
We move to the third question. You're asking me why I chose to write novels. I always had a dual orientation. Sciences. I studied with a historian, Francesco Barbagallo, who was a specialist for organized crime. But finally, I decided for a hybrid situation, a non-fiction novel, Gommora, 000, Solo il coraggio, about Falcone, George Falcone, but I did not do that for Terrazza dei Bambini. There was a reason. Novels help me get the message across more quickly and in a more emotional way, tell stories in an emotional way. When there is a lot of information, court rulings, discussions that brought some consolidated truth, I prefer to go for non-fiction novels. If I have to tell the story of children who at a very young age become bosses, It's still in the initial phases, so I choose to tell the story and the novel. I have to compensate for the lack of information with my own interpretation. Leonardo Sciascia helped me a lot. He's an Italian, Sicilian writer, and he used to say when I sat down to write something, I did not know whether it was going to be an essay or a novel. I start and I say, okay, if I have enough information, I want to demonstrate something, then I'll write an essay. If I don't have enough information and I simply want to tell the story, then I will write a novel. You're asking for advice to become an investigative reporter. Well, you have to train as an investigative reporter. That's not my experience, so I will not provide a universal answer, but my experience is the following. Whatever you do, choose something that you're interested in. Politics, energy, crime, immigration. And then you may obviously take a different direction, but if you want to train yourself, you have to have that in mind. And then you have to give yourself the time. Investigative reporting is not something you do overnight in a very short period of time. You don't write an article very quickly, and you cannot live in the hype, the hot topic. Investigative reporting means that you have to spend a lot, you have to look for people who are not necessarily available at all time and don't give you the information that will trigger everything. It's very good, it's interesting, it's great. Because reporters who tend to be experts of everything, well, the investigative reporter isn't that. He's an expert in one particular subject. So please choose a theme, something you're interested in. Accept the fact that it takes time. You can't let others impose on you the time needed to write an article. And finally, understand that there is a difference between investigative reporting and writing files. Most of the papers who ask you to write investigative reporting articles, it's not that. They simply ask you to write an article that will expose a file, and people will buy adverts from the newspaper so that they are not exposed by a file in the newspaper. Simply, the people will buy the adverts from that particular newspaper to be left alone. I mean, they do that all the time. And companies don't know it, and the public stakeholders know it as well. So what's the difference? Dossieraggio in Italian means that you investigate in private information, you use it in the context, and you use it as a threat. You brandish it as a threat. It's secret dossiers, we call them. And, it's not really private life. I mean, it has nothing to do with finding out that you have a certain relationship with a person. But if you write a secret dossier, you're not providing information that is useful for society, but it's scary for the person who is involved. So you take something in your life, and I blow it up, and I use it against you. Whereas investigative reporting is looking at a subject, taking the whole picture. And you're not there to demolish somebody. You're criticizing that person. You analyze that person's behavior. Obviously, the border between the two is not always very clear. Myself, I ask sometimes, am I writing a secret dossier or am I actually investigating? Am I trying to damage that person, or am I trying to give my readers an instrument, a tool to understand what is really happening? Where, for instance, if that person commits some crimes, do I want to inform society about those crimes? You remember the Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton scandal? Things changed afterwards. That kind of dossier used to be considered as B-series kind of reporting, and politicians did not care. But from the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal, it became construed as investigative reporting. I mean, there had been precedents with JFK and things like that, but the method makes a difference. The time you take makes a difference. You can't write a good article overnight. And if I were to give you a piece of advice, I would say read from the reporters. There is a French reporter everybody has forgotten about. Londré was his name. Albert Londré, he was very good. Rodolphe Walsh as well. I mean, if you're interested, I could give you a list of reporters you should read from. Read the articles written by these masters of reporting. Barzini, for instance, was a reporter I didn't like, but I didn't write what he wrote, but he was very good. And those people will help you understand. The same goes for writers. They say if you want to write a novel, read novels written by famous writers. They never tell a reporter to read articles written by famous reporters. And yet, it's true, because this is where you will find the DNA that will allow you to learn and grow. Well done.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Grazie anche a chi mi ha tradotto.
Thank you also for the translation.
Grazie a te. Grazie. Grazie.